Hi, everyone. Harry here to talk about a pretty significant ruling in the Voice of America case. Now, the whole landscape I know is very hard to keep track of, particularly because of this feature of temporary and the Supreme Court's use of the shadow docket. A district court will try to just freeze the linebackers while it decides. The Supreme Court will undo that. What's the, basic state of play then in the case? But this is a case that is now moved to a permanent injunction, and it is being presided over by Judge Royce Lambert. I'm pretty sure he's a Reagan appointee. He is in the D.C. District Court, and he's nobody's fool. I've been in front of him, and he can be pretty tough, and he is quite tough on the government here. The sort of headline is he finds, in this case, Michael Abramowitz, who was has been, and Lambert is basically saying still is, the head of the Voice of America against Kari Lake, who is on behalf of Trump trying to basically purge everyone from the Voice of America that they don't like. And this has now proceeded to a permanent injunction. And yesterday, Lambert holds these 500 employees that are seem to be under the axe and you're looking to get rid of. You keep them there. The permanent injunction enjoins you, Kari Lake and company, from doing anything to Michael Abramowitz. So it's a long, multi-count kind of complaint, but the important claim here was Abramowitz's motion for partial summary judgment, requesting a permanent injunction, barring Lake and the U.S. Agency for Global Media from removing him. So it's under the sort of, you could say, fiction as Voice of America's director without the consent of the International Broadcasting Advisory Board. I'll get back to that in just one second. But that is the actual count granted. You can't do it without getting the consent. Why does that matter? The law is clear, as it is in statutory scheme after statutory scheme that the administration has ignored. You can't just fire people. You rather need, in the case of the head of the Voice of America, to get the consent of the International Broadcasting Advisory Board. I think most people, by the way, out there understand a little about Voice of America. We don't have to go to it in depth, but it plays a really important role. I mean, you could say propaganda role, but that implies it's false news. It's not. They kind of stake out the democratic way of life, including they are not at all a kind of jingoistic outlet. They give it straight, but they really want and try to be available to listeners in especially totalitarian countries to give them the sense, here's how a democracy works and here's what's going on. And Abramowitz said, you've kept me from doing my job, as indeed they did. They basically reassigned him. And it was another way of saying you are out. And the arguments in court, what they're going to say, I think, and we'll see now, we can expect this to go to the D.C. Circuit and then to the Supreme Court. And it is part of the cluster of cases, including, say, the case involving the FTC, the case involving the Fed, of when the administration can simply ignore the commands of Congress in terms of some constraint on when they can fire people. And here the constraint is the consultation with that entity that they just never did. So under the current relevant law, it's clear. There's really no argument. Now, here's what they've tried to say, the administration. They've really ravaged the Voice of America, but the argument has been they can still do their essential job. And here's their essential job in getting out to the world, et cetera. And the plaintiffs, Abramowitz and others, have said, that's a joke. That's a bad joke. You've totally come in and run roughshod over us. We cannot do our job. We're being completely fettered. And I myself, Abramowitz, am out in the cold because I was recharacterized or reassigned the notice of directed reassignment, this is the very piece of paper that now has become null and void. You're going to be reassigned as the chief management officer in Greenville, North Carolina, effective September 6, 2025. What the hell does that mean? A few things. And I should say up front, I know Mike Abramowitz. We've been good friends for 30 plus years. So for what it's worth, you can consider that, but I don't think there's really any doubt. Lambert doesn't think there's really any doubt. It was just whatever else it means. It means he's not able to do his job, and that's what the request for partial summary judgment is based on, and that's what Lambert has done in filing it. He's done more, by the way. And it's important because it's part of the whole sort of battle back and forth with the courts and the administration. He said, but he's called the administration out for task and said, I've given you warning after warning, order after order. You just don't comply. I said, you've got to preserve the international broadcaster, the Voice of America's key operations, so we can figure out what is right and just to do here. And they're just, completely thumbing their nose at him, which is true. I mean, that's what they're doing everywhere. And he raises the specter of contempt proceedings. He suggests some really strong words from a district court judge that were happening more and more in the Trump 2.0 era. The agency appeared to mislead him about its plans for layoffs. He repeatedly said, you're cutting so deeply, the agency can't comply with its legal requirements. Not with my sense as Judge Lambert about what's good or bad. The requirements they have, it's a creature of statute. They're there for a particular pro-American reason, and they have a lot of requirements, and they can't comply with them. And the administration has just gotten up and said repeatedly, it's part of this divide between the poor lawyers who are kicked forward to try to defend the administration and the actual decision makers. But there's, no, we're not cutting into bone here. We're listening to your orders, Your Honor, and we're not going to do that unless you tell us it's okay. Here's what Lambert has to say. The court no longer harbors any doubt that defendants lack a plan to comply with the preliminary injunction. That was the, preliminary treatment, and instead have been running out the clock on the fiscal year, which is the period for which the Voice of America is granted money, while remaining in violation of even the most meager reading of the Voice of America's statutory obligations. That is strong stuff, right? I mean, he's basically saying, you're coming in, you're lying to me, you're trying to run out the clock so it comes time that you can just say, oops, too late, we can't do anything, we're in the next fiscal year. He said, But for a district court judge, it has become more and more common in the age of Trump 2.0. But for a district court judge to basically be saying, you guys are lying to me is, seismic. In the old Department of Justice, the shockwaves would go everywhere, and you would do all you could to repair your damaged bridges with the court. Here, it seems to be just an actual strategy. Just go in there and stall or whatever, and then we'll do what we want anyway. Needless to say, that's the opposite of what the rule of law requires. Now, just a final word on what the rule of law requires, because again and again, district courts have done something like this. They've seen the facts, they've seen what's going on the ground, and they clearly say, give me a break. You are totally violating the law and entrenching in Congress's garden. They've said, do this, you're ignoring it, etc. Now, the administration in district courts and courts of appeals can't say, well, that's because the law is unconstitutional. Why? Article 2, Article 2, Article 2. But they go running to the Supreme Court and say something like, dissolve this injunction because we are going to win this case when it comes up to you, because the provision that the district court has found we violated is going to be itself unconstitutional under the Second Amendment, which gives such powerful and you might say unitary power to the executive. And Lambert understands this possibility. Every judge on the DC bench understands this possibility. They've been really bidden by it by the Supreme Court repeatedly. So Lambert, in addition to absolutely excoriating the administration and absolutely finding, as is really uncontroversial, that Abramowitz and everyone was removed illegally, says it takes a little bit of a swipe, a gentle swipe at the Supreme Court and its use of shadow docket to say, as many judges with him have also said, we're left with no guidance here. You're the Supreme Court. You tell us we got to do something, we'll do it. But you do these shadow docket rulings often with literally no reasoning. And that's true. The last one on Friday, literally no reasoning. We don't know what we have to do. So he sort of serves that up there as a way of saying, if I am, like so many of my colleagues have been in this new chapter where the Supreme Court just, slaps me around and says, dissolve that injunction. Give me something. Give me some words and reasoning, etc., so I know what you're getting at. Because right now, and it's just a fact, again and again and again, with your irresponsible, I'm thinking now of Justice Kagan's dissent last Friday, where she calls out the majority of 6 with your irresponsible use of these shadow docket rulings. You're completely leaving us in the dark. Please don't do that. And they really are. And I'll just say again briefly, as I have, to give that kind of injunction that the Supreme Court does, it has to also find not just, presumably for constitutional reasons, a likelihood of success, but also balance of equities. There are 4 factors they have to find. They've been given them really sloppy short shrift. And that's why Lambert does them very carefully here. So the Supreme Court by rights would have to speak to, what's the terrible irreparable injury if Voice of America stays on the air with, as they're saying is happening, but with Michael Abramowitz as the director, that's what they're going to have to show, or at least Lambert says, is making it clear, here's why on these other things like balance of equities, like irreparable injury, also Abramowitz and company wins. So bottom line, those 500, don't you fire them, Kari Lake. Abramowitz, you are back as of today. You don't have to go to North Carolina. You go to your old office and you continue to do your job. And that's the state of play. We'll wait for the emergency race to the DC Circuit and Supreme Court, as we've seen many times with usual chagrin because of the paucity of explanation. Supreme Court could mess with this, but as of today, Voice of America, the 500 anyway, who are remaining, are back. Talk to you later. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video and other Talking Feds content, please take a second to like and subscribe. Talk to you later.